I've watched iron pours since the earliest years of my childhood, and every time I've watched one is just as exciting as the last time. Part of its awe-inspiring entertainment is of course all of the fire and molten iron, but a lot of it is thanks to the unique characters that you find in the iron casting community. Iron casting is a team art, it's not something you can really do by yourself. I mean, you try lifting one of these things on your own, filled to the brim with 3,000 degree liquid iron. Or don't, actually it's very dangerous. Always do this with a professional. Speaking of professionals, this is Mac. He's the one in charge of the Firefest iron pours. And this year, he's got Trip, Carl, and Joe as his right-hand men. These guys, they know what they're doing. With them is also a great team of support varying in degrees of experience. An iron pour doesn't have to consist entirely of experts, but it does require hard workers who are cooperative, attentive, and good listeners, which this crew certainly was. Not to mention they were just a lot of fun to be around. They're all unique characters with their own distinctly different styles of art, but all share a crucial element which brings them all together, their love of iron. So, we've got our dream team. Now what? There's a ton of prep work that goes into an iron pour. Firstly, the artists must have molds. Molds are made of sand and resin, and there are two types, closed and open-faced. The days leading up to the pour consist mostly of cleaning the furnace, breaking the coke, which is the fuel, and breaking the iron. Iron usually comes into a pour in the form of scraps, which then they make smaller into palm-sized pieces, or like little rocks. The day of the pour, there's usually someone still breaking iron. And the molds have to be set out in front of the furnace, and the bots, which plug the furnace later, are made out of clay, sand, and sawdust. The inside of the furnace is prepared too. First, you do what's called laying in the bed, by placing a layer of sand for insulation. On top of that, you need a thin layer of something to lock the sand in. Some people use a thin layer of clay and sand mix, but Carl here likes to use sugary soda drinks. Preferably grape soda, but we have to do with Dr. Pepper this go around. This, when lit under the charcoal, is caramelized, keeping the sand from flying around. On top of that is the coal, for ignition, and then a layer of coke, which you fill to the top of what's called the wind belt. Then you light it all up and wait for things to get nice and hot. The whole preparation is kind of a slow and quiet process with a lot of waiting, but the switch into action happens quick. When you start to hear the first shouts of "Fire! Go!" you know that the time is near for the show to start. Soon comes the first tap. A tap is when they break the seal in the spout open. It's always so satisfying to see. And it amazes me how much iron flows just like water. Really, really hot water. There are specific assigned roles in an iron pour. Usually you have the pour master, who is the one who manages the pour team and directs the order of molds to pour into. The charger, who loads the furnace with coke and iron. The slagger, this person stands in the back of the furnace and keeps the flow of slag coming out of the furnace. The tapper, who breaks the seal open. The skimmer, who cleans the iron before pouring. Then the donkey and the pourer. The donkey holds the ladle steady while the pourer tips it over. Lastly, but also very important, we have the botter, the one who plugs the spout again, so, you don't have hot iron spilling everywhere. On closed molds, there's usually one or more pour cups and several vents to let air escape and to signal that you filled the mold enough. You've got to pour quickly because iron cools fast, and pouring too slow can cause deformities, cracking, and unevenness in your piece. For open-faced molds, you pour straight in, keeping an eye to make sure that the flow is even and consistent. For this pour, there were about 40 different molds, and in total they used around 1,200 pounds of iron, which, believe it or not, that's considered a small pour. The whole pouring process took about an hour and a half, and after all the molds had been filled, they realized they had some extra iron. Any extra iron after that is simply poured into the sand. This, once cooled, can be used later in another pour. The casters usually have a celebratory drink and take a break while they wait for their pieces to cool a little more. Like I said before, iron solidifies fast, so within an hour after pouring you can usually go ahead and open your molds. The artists get to see how their pieces turned out and often go ahead and start cleaning with wire brushes. Any unwanted sprues or extra metal flashing sticking out in odd places will be cut off and ground down later once everything is completely cooled off. This year, pretty much all the pieces turned out perfectly. There were no crazy mishaps, and even though it had been raining earlier in the day, the clouds held back entirely during the whole pour. Tripp claims he's the lucky charm. If it's raining, the rain always seems to stop once he lights the furnace. Maybe he's right. Who knows? What we do know is everyone had a great time and are already looking forward to the next time they can all get together to do another pour. And maybe next Firefest, you'll be able to join us too.